Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Glad y'all are here today. And yes, you did hear Jamie correctly. She said that we have an upcoming program about stress, good stress and bad stress. There is good stress, believe it or not. But let's jump right into today. What to expect as dementia progresses. So we're going to do an overview of dementia. We're going to go through each of the stages of dementia. And for this program, we're just going to do 3 stages, early, middle, and late. We're also going to talk just a little bit about the brand new medication that was approved and was out, FDA approved yesterday, went out on the market. And so I've got a slide specific to that. So let's get started with what is dementia. And again, many of you, you've heard this, you've been on our programs, but I don't know that we can hear it enough. We've got to hear it so that we can then pass it on and teach other people. Number one question we get asked, and those of you that are professionals who work in the field, I'm sure you get asked the same question. What is the difference in dementia and Alzheimer's disease? There's even healthcare workers who do not answer this question correctly. So what is the difference in dementia and Alzheimer's? Dementia is the loss of cognitive functioning and behavioral abilities to the extent that it interferes with a person's daily life. And there's way, way more to dementia than memory loss. So many folks believe that the word dementia is a synonym or equals memory loss. Memory loss is one of the symptoms. So dementia itself is an umbrella term. We'll look at that on the next slide. And just like cancer is an umbrella term, we have someone who gets diagnosed with cancer. Our first question would likely be what kind, what type, what form of cancer. Someone is diagnosed with dementia. What kind of dementia? There's over 100 different kinds, types, forms, causes of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common. That's why we hear about it more than we hear about the others. This new medication that has just been approved is specific for Alzheimer's disease. Again, we'll talk about that more. Some of the other things that are affected by dementia: thinking and reasoning, judgment. Sometimes that's how we as the family members first see the disease, is because they're not making good decisions. Their judgment's off. They are doing things they normally wouldn't do, saying things they normally wouldn't say, paying the bills twice, not paying the bills at all, getting lost in familiar places, not having as great a hygiene as they used to have, because hygiene has a lot of sequencing. There's a lot of steps to taking care of ourselves, and that's affected with dementia. All of the senses changing, so that sensory input and the motor output changing. Movement and coordination, of course, goes right along with that. Dementia is progressive. All of the dementias are progressive. It is a terminal illness. And right now, we don't have anything, we don't have any way to treat it to the point that we can cure it. We're moving closer, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. What's actually happening in the brain of somebody who has dementia is that those brain cells are dying. They degenerate and they die. So they are going from a normal 3-pound brain down to about a 1-pound brain at the end of the disease. Now, you'll notice on this particular slide, it says reversible dementias. And we don't like that term. We prefer to call it reversible memory loss, because there's really not a reversible dementia, but there is some reversible memory loss, because memory loss can be a symptom of other things like a major depressive disorder, infections, a medication interaction, a vitamin deficiency, a thyroid disorder. There's all kinds of things that might cause us to be confused or have some memory loss, but then we treat it and that symptom goes away. In dementia, real dementia, Alzheimer's, vascular, frontotemporal, Parkinson's disease dementia, the frontotemporal dementias, the terminal dementias, the progressive dementias, the memory loss does not go away. So this is a great graphic because it shows kind of those symptoms raining down on that umbrella of dementia. And then let's look at this picture as well, this graphic as well. That healthy brain is about 3 pounds. At the very end the disease, all dementias, the brain is going to be about 1 pound, and it affects everyone differently. There is a saying, if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen one person with dementia, and that's exactly right. Because depending on where the damage is in the brain, where the plaque is growing in the brain, where the tangles are in the brain, whichever type of dementia it is, if it's vascular, where was the stroke? Where are the TIAs? Where was the traumatic brain injury? Those type things. That's why people with dementia, there's about 36 symptoms to dementia, and your loved one may have 5 or 6 of them, and someone else may have 10 or 12, and someone else may have 30. But they all have dementia. We've got a really simple video. This is about 3 minutes, and it's going to show us the progression specifically of Alzheimer's. Most dementias progress in a similar way to this, but this is a 3-minute video we're going to watch.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination, and in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
We like to use that video because doesn't it really do a great job at making the point that the brain controls everything? I think that's one of the hardest conversations I have to have with family members often, is not fully understanding why their loved one might stop eating, or they're sleeping more, or they're not metabolizing their food, or even for that part, metabolizing their medication later in the disease. Breathing changes. the ability to walk, all of those things controlled by the brain. We're going to look at something in just a little bit called the theory of retrogenesis that hopefully will clear that up for you. We're going to go through the stages. We're going to start with early mild stage. We like to call this normalization. This is where we are going to do our very best to keep things as normal as possible. Some of the things that we can expect in the earliest stages of the disease. And there's a lot of information here. Jamie has already put the slides in the chat, plus you will be getting a copy of this recording and a copy of the slides in a follow-up email. We encourage you to share these with other people. Something else we hear a lot is I've got family members that are educating themselves. Well, send them this and give them the chance to learn what you're learning today. So some of the things we might see in those earliest stages of the disease, especially word finding, and maybe starting to not know the exact name of something or a proper noun. And so we start to have lots of things and stuff. You know, the thing, and the thing, and the stuff. You know, that stuff and the thing. And what we can then say is, what does the thing do? Show me the stuff. And many times they'll be able to say, you know, that thing that writes. They know what it does. They can't call pen or pencil or marker. Getting lost in a familiar place, getting really irritated. And they're getting irritated because they're not understanding. You may see some anxiety. You may see some depression. If they've been told they have dementia, if they even suspect that this is happening, of course there's going to be some depression that is expected. We talked a little bit about hygiene, shortened attention span or shortened concentration because I can't follow the storyline. So maybe they've always liked a particular show on TV and now it's just too much. And maybe they're more interested in things from the past. Andy Griffith. We don't necessarily have to follow that storyline. Game shows. It's not really a storyline. Having a really hard time with their senses, like, what is that background noise? I've got a sound machine going and I've had people with dementia tell me it's really raining outside. And it's the sound machine because they can't interpret the noise. And in this part of the disease, it can really seem like it's coming and going. They're confused and then they're not. And they also are less able to recognize risk or danger. Now, I want to go back to why can it be like it's there and then it's not? Think about it this way. As that brain is starting to die, it doesn't just happen like that overnight. It's making connections, miss, connect, miss. What makes the miss? I didn't sleep well. I didn't take my medicine this morning. I didn't eat well. You're in a bad mood as my caregiver, and I'm picking up on that. I'm depressed. And on this particular day, I can't even put my own shoes on. But the next night, I sleep all night long. I get up and you're in a good mood. I'm in a good mood. The sun is shining. I take my medicine. I have a good breakfast. I get myself completely dressed. Eventually, it's going to miss because it isn't going to be there anymore to even make the connection because the brain is dying. Let's look at some other things to expect in the early stages. This is when we have to decide, how are we going to tell friends and family? When are we going to tell friends and family? This is the time to make sure our financial and our medical decisions are made and that our paperwork is done. Allow the person with dementia to have say in what they want to happen to them. I've even had families that they started looking at facilities. They started looking at centers. And the person with dementia helped pick where they were going to stay eventually, if it came to that. Really starting to get into a routine. Routine is important with dementia. And then we want to go out and we want to live and do the things that we want to do. We want to take the trip. We want to go to the concert. We want to see the movies. We want to go to the grandkids' games. We want to do as much as we can. Focusing on normalization. In the earliest stages of the disease, reminders, setups, and cues don't take away their dignity, don't take away their independence. Let's take a look at medications that are very common. And like I said earlier, I've added the newest one that just came out yesterday. We do not have any medications that can cure any of the dementias. But let's look at what we do have. And some of these have been around for a very long time. Most everybody at one time or another has heard of Aricept. That's typically the first one that they will put someone on, and it's approved for all stages of the disease. The next two that we hear about the most often, Namenda and Exelon. It looks like I got my, I'm not quite lined up there when I added the new one. So Namenda, we tend to use a little bit more in the moderate to severe. Exelon, mild to moderate. Again, this is the doctors know best. We are not the doctors. We're just giving you the information. We want to get on the medications as early as we can to see if they're going to work for our loved one. For most of these medications, you'll find that they will say 18 to 36 months is what they believe they work. Now, I have known people that have been on Aricept for 7 years, for 10 years, and that is fine. I've got a physician that I know calls Aricept a comfort med, that they believe that Aricept is a comfort medication. I've had other people that they stay on it for a while, they come off of it and they don't see any change. So they know at that point they're not getting anything else out of that medication. Common side effects from a lot of these medications are nausea, stomach pain, diarrhea, those type of things. And in some people, they can't take it because of that. So the new medication is the second one there. This one is specific for people with mild cognitive impairment and early Alzheimer's. I've got the generic name and the brand name. Again, all of this just broke yesterday, and so I added all of this morning. And I've got some notes on here about it. The two things that they are seeing in this new medication, brain swelling and brain bleeds. However, what this medication does when it works is it actually is clearing the protein and the amyloid plaques in the brain. 17% of the people who were in the trial, and the trial was 18 months, had success with it. By 6 months, they were actually able to stop taking it because they'd had success. Now, that does not mean that it had completely cleared the plaque. It had not. But some of the information that I read said that it was like it held them in place longer, if that makes sense. It held that plateau longer. The cost of this, $32,000 a year, and it's treatments every month. It's an infusion every month. So let me show you some scans of people on the new medication. I just found this today. These are brain scans of the people who were in the clinical trials. And you can see the difference in the plaque at the beginning of the trial and the plaque as they were going through the trial. So one of the physicians that was part of this trial said, if these drugs continue to remain effective, the data will show that the individual patients who had more amyloid removed from their brains experienced slower rates of cognitive decline. And he compared it to whenever we first started having medications for HIV. And if you remember, HIV, AIDS used to be a death sentence. It's not anymore. So he's comparing it to when we first started having medications for HIV, it slowed the progression and it gave the scientists time to now they've got the cocktail that people can take to the point that a person with HIV can live a normal life expectancy. I think that's where they're headed with this, is can this medication hold that person in MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or the earliest stages of Alzheimer's till maybe that next new thing comes out. It also said the better the patient's health going into this, the likelihood of survival was longer. It did say, though, this is where it's kind of back and forth. The slowing of the decline was not a huge difference. And here was an example they gave. It can make a difference between mild forgetfulness to just having to be reminded of appointments and other things. And it also said that it slowed progression 4.5 to 7.5 months, where one of the other medications they came out with, it was 5 months, and it's one that they've pulled off the market recently. So it's promising. It is promising. It does say that nearly half of those who stayed on this infusion for a year stayed at the same level. That's good. Of the people who were in the study, 3 of them passed away because of the brain bleeds or the brain swelling. So at least we have something out there now. It is definitely something to talk to doctors about. They're just, like I said, this just came out yesterday, so there's still a lot to find out about it, but we want to make sure and talk to our physicians. I wanted to make sure to mention it, though. The next video we're going to watch is we are going to see the story of people who are in the early stages of the disease. This is another short video where they are going to talk about their own particular experiences.
There were times where coming home from work, I got lost. I ended up calling my wife saying, I don't know where the heck I am. A lot of it is just confusion. You hit these moments of fog.
When I left the house, I went to church and I had my clothes inside out. I didn't see it at all. My memory just blanks out.
If you picture a Christmas tree with lights, one starts to flicker a little bit. And you go over and you tap it and it goes back on. But then eventually that one that was flickering doesn't go on anymore. To me, that's what dementia is like. Dementia is an umbrella that covers many, many different types of cognitive impairments, of brain diseases. Your memory changes, your emotion changes, personality changes. And then you start with the confusion and disorientation.
For us to finally get the diagnosis took about 1.5 years. Process of elimination. Is it depression? Is it Lyme disease? An infection in the brain? You don't know what the heck is wrong with you, but you know something's wrong.
When I got diagnosed, it felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Literally, it just overwhelmed me. I went through a horrible depression thinking life is over for me.
I'm sorry. The last thing on my mind was that I'd be dealing with what I'm dealing with right now. I would do anything to go back to that time. I'm not the same person I was.
There is no proof that any medication will slow down dementia. There are many research drugs out there. There's no proof that any of them are doing anything. There's no hope for a cure right now, but there is hope. There is hope.
Nobody wakes up the day after they get a diagnosis and all of a sudden they're end stage. This disease is a progression. Just because I have dementia doesn't mean that my life is over or that I don't want to contribute to my community, society in general, or especially my family.
Maybe I can't do everything I used to do the same way, but I can still do a lot. But we have to figure out how to do them differently, which means figuring out how to overcome the obstacles.
When you come to a bump in the road in your life, you have two choices. You can either move forward or you can stay stuck. I realized that I still was a valuable person. Get your ass up out of bed and live.
I'm trying as hard as I can, living a meaningful, purposeful life.
I don't want just to survive dementia. I want to thrive. I want those happy times to continue as long as they can.
I think some of the key words there: meaningful, purposeful, thrive. And that was coming from people who have been diagnosed. I still want to have meaning. I don't want somebody saying to me, go sit down over there, we've got it. And that's what we tend to do an awful lot with our loved ones, because maybe they didn't do it like they used to, or maybe they didn't do it like we want them to do it, and they start feeling dismissed. So normalization, early stages. Let's move to the middle stages. The middle or the moderate stages of the disease we like to call the supportive stages of the disease. This is when we are accepting, we're adapting to a new reality, most definitely. This is the longest stage of the disease in most people. This is where we're going to start seeing changes in everything. And when we use the word supportive, we mean they're going to need help with most everything at this stage. So I want us to think about, what does that look like? Language is going to change. 2 language centers in the brain. Day-to-day language is stored on the left, and that left language tends to leave earlier. So day-to-day leaves. The right side of the brain holds a different type of language. That's a more rhythmic language. And rhythmic language is music and poetry and numbers and letters and nursery rhymes. But it's also curse words, racial slurs, and sex talk. Those 3 things store on the right. They don't store on the left, because left is day-to-day language. And when we were very young and learning our words, those were not our day-to-day words. So sex talk, racial slurs, and curse words will store on the right, and they'll stay. And people who've never used them will sometimes use them, usually to get a need met. That's where we have to step back, educate ourselves, and try to figure out, why are they using that word? What word are they trying to say? Is it help me? But it's coming out as a curse word. And if you ask them, are you hurting? Very likely you may get no, but you get no with a furrowed brow and a frown. Yes, I'm hurting. Help me. But they can't say those words. They can't find those words. Another thing that changes with communication, not only can they not say the words, but they're not understanding the language as well. We're going to start having greater lapses in memory in the middle stages. Time pretty much is going to start to go away. 3 a.m. does not mean anything, but the words daytime and nighttime probably do. So if they get up in the middle of the night and they start to get dressed, and we say it's 3 a.m., well, what is 3 a.m.? That doesn't mean anything. But if we show them it's dark outside, because we learned nighttime when we were really little, and that nighttime is for sleep. The ability to recognize risk is very impaired in the middle stages of the disease. They're very curious, but they don't recognize risk. So what is this? Walking out in traffic, walking away in the store, touching the hot stove. And when we talk about that theory of retrogenesis in just a minute, what we're going to look at is developmental age, as they are literally going back in time. That developmental age is changing. And it doesn't do us a bit of good to look at them and say something like, you know better. They don't. It's gone. It's like they're unlearning everything that they ever learned. Going to see a lot of changes in the 5 senses in the middle stage, lack of coordination. Many people end up in the wheelchair in the middle stage, or on a walker, maybe using a cane. They are going back to who they originally were. And who were we originally? When we were born, we were not walking, we were not talking, we were not feeding ourselves, we were not toileting ourselves, and we were sleeping a lot. And that's where they're headed. Let's look at some other things that we can expect. As the caregiver, this is when we really have to start developing some positive coping skills and filling our toolbox, coming to programs like this, plugging into a support group, finding out that we can't take everything our loved one says personally, because they may use our name in a sentence that's not very nice. And maybe they don't use our name, but they just say something that's not very nice. Things are really going to change in the middle stages. When we say supportive approach, we're talking about they need help, but they can still do a lot. We want to focus on what remains. We never want to focus on what's lost. Because of time, I'm going to skip this next video. It's just a really short video on mid-stage, but I want to get to late stage, and I want to make sure we talk about the theory of retrogenesis and then leave time for any questions if there are any that Jamie hasn't answered. Okay, late in the disease, we're going to call this the comfort stage. We may also call this the sensory stage.
Okay, I'll wait for you. Huh?
This is the advanced stage of the disease. This is maximum need, which means that they're going to be total care. This is for the person with dementia and for the caregiver. This is one of the hardest times. There's not an easy time in the disease, but total care means they need us to do just about everything for them. Again, we still want to focus on what remains. So let's look at some changes that we can expect. Recognition of self. It's interesting because a person well into the disease, late in the disease, many times doesn't even recognize themselves. I've had people look in a mirror in middle stages of the disease and ask, who is that old woman? Why is there a man in the house? Because they don't recognize that that's them. Because in their mind, they're much younger. The ability to recognize family. This can be one of the hardest things. They have not always had grandchildren. They haven't always had children. They haven't always had a spouse. They've always had a mama and a daddy. They may have always had a brother and a sister. They've always had grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, teachers from when they were very, very young. So they may look in the face of a spouse and say mama or daddy. They're going back to who they originally were. Rigid muscles, very common. Usually in the last stage of the disease, the person is in the wheelchair. There are a lot of falls when we learn to walk. There are a lot of falls when a person stops walking. We cannot bubble wrap somebody and put them in a recliner because families want us to guarantee their loved one won't fall. We can't. And isn't there some dignity with risk? I ask families all the time, would you want to be put in a recliner and leaned back to the point you couldn't get out? You're like a turtle on your back. And that's your life day in and day out. But I'm keeping you safe. There's some dignity with risk. And there's things that we can do, but we cannot guarantee someone's not going to fall. In fact, I can just about guarantee they will. Because as we learn to walk, we fail. And as we stop walking, we're going to fall. They're needing total care in all the activities of daily living at this point. We also, as caregivers, have to look, listen, and feel to meet their needs because they're not able to say, I really have a headache today. But they may be holding their head. They may have a furrowed brow. They may be rocking while they're holding their head. They're telling us with their body. And again, if you say to them, does your head hurt? You likely will get no. No is one of the first 5 words that most people learn. And no is one of the words that stays with people till the end of life. During the last stage of the disease is when a person will go on hospice care. We've got an entire program on hospice where we answer everything you could possibly think about with hospice. I encourage you to look for that on our YouTube page or coming up. But hospice does not mean the person is imminent. Hospice means we think they are within 6 months. We want to get on hospice sooner rather than later so that we have another care team in place. Some of the other things that we can do during this time: social and emotional activity. Calling friends, have them come over for lunch, being present, allowing them to come over and sit with your loved one so maybe you can go out. Cognitive stimulation, reminiscence therapy, those are things that we have programs on as well. Doing as much physical activity as we can. Throughout the course of dementia, we want to make sure our loved ones going in and out of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. All three of those are beneficial. And again, they're going to go in and out. As the disease progresses, they're going to go in and out of each of those therapies. Late in the disease is also where they are likely going to develop problems with swallowing. That's controlled by the brain. That's where speech therapy comes in. That's where our loved one has a swallow test. It's where their diet starts to change. We're going from a regular diet to a soft diet, to maybe even a pureed diet. There may be a time that they're on a diet called a finger food diet. Because let's think about, I talked about we're going back in time. How did we learn to eat? First, we were fed. Someone fed us. Then we used our fingers. Then we used the spoon, then the fork, then the knife. They're going to lay them down in that order. The knife's going to go away first. Then the fork will go away. They'll use the spoon for a long, long time, and they will use finger foods for a very long time. But eventually, they will need assistance at mealtime. The more education you receive as a caregiver, support groups that you get into, programs like this that you do, it's going to make the journey with your loved one easier on you, which will make it easier on them. I've been talking about the theory of retrogenesis. And look at this statement. The brain of a person, and I'm going to say with dementia, deteriorates in the reverse order that the brain developed from birth. So it's going to deteriorate in the reverse order. We are going to start focusing on quality of life. We can't cure this, so we are not curative when we work in memory care. We're not curing anything, but boy, can we provide comfort and quality of life. I teach all of the students who come through the West Center because students come in and they are all about saving lives. We're about quality of life because we're not curing this. This is progressive, this is terminal, but boy, can we have joy in dementia? And is there life to be had in dementia? Most definitely. I do want us to take the time to watch this last video, and then we're really going to deep dive into that theory of retrogenesis for several minutes.
This still is to me, Jan. Died on the 22nd of August after probably around about 25 years with dementia, right from the very first sign to her passing gently in her sleep, peacefully. I can think of no more difficult situation than long-term dementia. I really can't. I mean, I've had family members with cancer, I've had family members with heart problems, all sorts of stuff. I can't think of a single thing which is worse than dementia, because with dementia there is no hope. In truth, I'm rejoicing that she's free of it and that she's at peace now. Jan and I were close, really, really close. My mum said, you can't see where Jan stops and Bruce begins. because we were, I can't explain it. We were just so close. We never ever had an argument, not once. At the time when Jan was at the stage of needing it, there was very little help available. So we had no respite. We had no people coming in. It was literally just me trying to look after her, plus hold down a full-time job. So many people didn't visit her because they said, we want to remember her as she was. And, oh, God, I'd go mad at that, because that denies the person as they now are. And they're the same person, for God's sake. It's just this wall comes down which stops them communicating with you and stops them communicating with their own body and stuff. But if you say, well, I want to remember them as they were 20 years ago, then what good's that? Useless. When speech goes, and I think her hearing was a bit dodgy as well. I couldn't tell because you couldn't ask her because she couldn't answer. So you have to find ways of communicating, and increasingly what I was doing was putting my forehead on her forehead, because I think she picked up the vibrations of my voice, because she certainly did respond to that. You would find that you go for months without any obvious response, and then one day you say something just not expecting anything and she'd say yes. And you think, where did that come from? And you suddenly realize that they're in there all the time. They just haven't got the means of getting out, and what you've got to do is you've got to try and, more than ever, get into their world and try and find some way of making contact. At the end, August the 16th, Jan stopped eating and drinking. I spoke to the GP, and the GP said, I think she's just tired of it all. So it was 6 days later she passed away, but I spent the last days with her all day long, holding her hand, talking to her. And that was the really important point. I had the opportunity to be with her, and it gave me time to say all the things I needed to say to her. In all these things, I'm looking at Jan with dementia, and I want to get back to Jan before dementia. So, and that's already happening. I was on a walk the other day. I like to walk around a little bit, and I got a kind of a sliver of Jan as she was way before dementia came, and so I think she's coming back to me now.
Wasn't that something to hear him say? I think she's coming back to me now. Some of the other things that he said as well. She's in there, but she can't get out. They stop communicating, and they also lose the ability to communicate with their own body. That makes sense. And then he talked about putting his forehead on her forehead. At the end stage of the disease, the world becomes very, very, very small. And we teach that. We teach families to put their forehead on their loved one's forehead. Get really, really close. Come into their world. That's part of what we do, is we go to their world. Throughout the course of this disease, the best thing that we can do is go to their world. With that theory of retrogenesis, one of the things that we're looking at is where are they as far as their developmental age. So let's think we're looking at our loved one and they can still dress themselves, but maybe they don't dress themselves appropriately. They can still feed themselves, but there's a mess after they have finished eating. So let's say that developmentally, they're about on the age of a 5-year-old. So instead of focusing on what a 5-year-old cannot do, we're not going to send a 5-year-old out to drive. We're not going to send a 5-year-old to the bank to make some decisions. We aren't going to have a 5-year-old go in and cook a meal, although they might still be able to put something down in the toaster. If we tell a 5-year-old to go in and get dressed and let's get ready for church, they may come out in their cowboy boots and their pink tutu and a unicorn horn because they got dressed and they can dress themselves. But did they dress appropriately? So it's important for many people to think about that aspect of it. Where are they developmentally realizing we're going back? And think about feelings and emotions of a 5-year-old. What can a 5-year-old process? Can they be reasonable or rational? Somewhat. If we talk louder and slower to them, does it help? No. Our loved one's not going to be able to be reasonable or rational. We go to their world. They can't come to ours. They would if they could. They're not giving us a hard time. They're having a hard time. They're doing the best that they can with what remains. We, as the caregivers, and it's the healthcare professionals, we adapt to their disease. We can't. One of the things that makes dementia so different from many, many other diseases. So how do we do it? We do it by being on a program like this, getting as much knowledge as you can. When these new medications come out, I can't tell you how many articles I've read just since yesterday. Building your skills, keep listening to and coming back to programs. Even if you've heard it before, you're going to catch something that you didn't catch before. Be committed, be flexible. You cannot work in memory care if you're not flexible. I hope you figured that out. Practicing and then having compassion. And I want us to see this, and then we're going to open up for questions. There's one thing Alzheimer's cannot take away, and that is love. Love is not a memory. It's a feeling that resides in your heart and in your soul. And I think one of the things that we can do with families also is to be very, very honest and talk about what is it that you're feeling. And when you can, in counseling, we say, if you can name it, you can tame it. And what is it that I'm feeling? And so many times what it is grief, but we associate grief with death instead of associating grief with loss. And this is grief from the minute we think our loved one has dementia, because I know what every one of us did, and I'm saying us, it can't be. There's no way. It has to be something else. And that's denial. And we'll do it with every single stage of the disease. As our loved one moves from early to mid, because probably by the time we move from early to mid, we've come to that acceptance. We've made a plan. Maybe we're going to a day program. We're bringing some people in. We've got a routine, and they change. They're becoming more incontinent. They are having trouble walking. Maybe they can't do near as much for themselves. And now who else has to change? I do. And we'll start back through, it can't be. There's no way. How? Denial. And then we'll get again to where we're at a comfortable place. And we look up and we realize they're eating with their hands all the time. They're no longer using any utensils, or they're completely incontinent, or they're sleeping 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day, up to 20. End of the disease. Think about a newborn. Newborn can sleep up to 20 hours a day. End of the disease can sleep up to 20 hours a day, and that's normal. That's part of the disease process. But how are you supposed to know that? And what does it do to us? That's why we have a grief group. When Jamie was talking about our support groups, we have a group specific to grief, because we are grieving the loss of the relationship the way it was. We still have a relationship with them. We'll always have a relationship with them, but we grieve the loss of the relationship the way it was. And we also grieve the loss of the relationship the way we thought it was going to be, because this wasn't the plan for anybody. This wasn't the plan. All right, so let me see if Jamie can hop back on real quick. It looks like there's been some stuff in chat.
There are. I'm trying to type as fast as I can. There was one question. What services can a geriatrician offer versus a neurologist? And I was typing in, but I'll just answer it. Generally, geriatricians look at the whole person. all of their health, coexisting illnesses, comorbidities, so it's whole person health, where a neurologist really focuses on the brain. They might take into consideration other things, but their main expertise is the brain. Geriatrician looks at the whole person.
And somebody was asking about information on that grief group. We do meet the second Saturday of each month from 10:30 to 12. Every once in a while, I do have to change it. In July, we're meeting the third Saturday. But if you are on my email list, I always send it in the email. If you're not on my email list and you want to be, you can email me, and it's hglover@jameslwest.org. That will be in the email that comes from Jamie, because it's also on this last slide. It has my information and Jamie's information. The brain banks in North Texas. There's a brain bank at UNT Health Science Center. I could Google it. There's also a brain bank at UT Southwest. We are blessed in the DFW area that we have the 2 brain banks, and so many people donate. We have a lot of folks who live here who are part of our support groups that they donate, and they plan on donating their own as well, just for research. That's how we learn. So there are brain banks at UNT Health Science Center and at UT Southwest. Other questions? Jamie, was there anything else?
Not unless I didn't adequately answer the other questions.
I
but-
bet you did.
Let's see.
Good job
Just
talking
as,
about the testing. Yeah.
yeah. We will send out the follow-up emails. We'll have a copy of the slides. I'll send links of the videos that are in the slides as well. Of course, information on all our upcoming programs, the support groups, and a link to an evaluation. Again, we ask everybody complete the very short evaluation, because we really do appreciate your feedback and use that. But if you are wanting CE credits for social work, nursing, licensed counselor, or a certificate of attendance for this 1 hour, you must complete that evaluation. And then if you'll allow us several weeks to process all those and get them back out to you.
We also encourage everybody to look at our YouTube channel. We have got a lot of our recorded videos that we've done over the last 4 years now. There's dozens of videos on there. We have people contact us from all over the world that have found us on YouTube. So we've got some really specific videos on there. And if for some reason you've got a topic and you can't find it, if you will email me or email Jamie, we likely have a program on it, and we can send you the slides or send you a recording of it. I encourage you to really look at that Dealing with Dementia. If you've got those 4 hours, it is one of our very best programs that we do in conjunction with the Rosalind Carter Institute. But we do need you to register sooner rather than later, because we got to mail you the guide. So please get in contact with Jamie for that. We are so glad y'all were on today. Jamie, you got anything else to add?
I do not. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you.